In a sense, a comparative framework provides a strong backcloth against which the foreground can be seen. Without it, much of the foreground is invisible. This is one of the reasons why many of the most important and outstanding features of early modern England, for instance, are literally invisible to many of us. As Tawney put it, he little knows of England, who only England knows. How then can we proceed? Let me first construct a first lens, the method of contrast. The first step we can take to overcome this judicial blindness is to build up a model of what normally happens in agrarian societies. It's not, of course, an easy matter. If I may be autobiographical, this is what I attempted to do in a number of earlier works. In relation to witchcraft, I looked to see how witchcraft worked in Africa and elsewhere, and then contrasted it to England. In relation to peasantries, I did the same, and came to the conclusion that a, quote, real peasantry was never to be found in England. In relation to violence, I found an absence of proper bandits, mafia, and so on. This widening of the perspective can be enormously valuable, yet it poses several problems. One of these is that we end up with a very long list of contrasts. For instance, if we look at a composite model of the 17th century Asia and compared it to England, we would end up with a vast number of absences on both sides. This may lead us to ask all sorts of new questions of a counterfactual kind, and hence stimulate the mind. What we have done can be represented in terms of the telescope. Through the methods of contrast, we have now created a lens. This is a lens which widens our vision. We begin to see many things in our past in a fresh light, because they are no longer natural. It brings into the field of vision, through a mysterious process which is difficult to describe, a huge array of material which was hitherto invisible. Almost everything in the past becomes special, significant, different, odd, a source of wonder. But that is not enough. We need a second lens. Comparison. The danger of just having this one lens, however, is that the expansion of our vision is too large. In a sense, too many solutions are let in. The answer is over-determined. In relation to the European miracle, which is part of the question I'm asking, for instance, we are at a loss as to whether it is the absence of slavery, the absence of pollution beliefs, the absence of strong gender oppositions, the absence of hydraulic agriculture, the absence of rice cultivation, or many other absences that are important. Like a single lens in a telescope, it makes it difficult to concentrate, to see a long distance. There are a host of facts and interpretations, an endless inventory of possible explanations for everything. Here I would like to suggest a further refinement of the technique, which is, I am sure, standard in scientific work, but which has become increasingly of interest to me, largely by accident. The experiment I'm undertaking is to add to the thought processes a country which is, in many ways, extraordinarily similar, and in other ways extraordinarily different from England, namely Japan, over the last 1,000 years. By keeping the first lens of contrast in place, and then adding the case of Japan, the whole process is made very much more powerful. We have now constructed the two lenses that are needed for a proper telescope. The first lens widens our vision. It distances our past by comparing the English experience with some stark contrasts, namely India, China, etc. The first lens allows us to see some very large and important features of the kind which Weber drew our attention to in the West: Christianity, pluralistic and competing small nation-states, peculiar forms of the city, an absence of slavery and of a very rigidified caste system, an absence of pollution beliefs and animal sacrifice, a very powerful and constantly advancing technology, a less crisis-ridden demography, and so on. We get a sense of the whole which we need. Anything is excluded. The eye expands and expands. Adding Japan provides a second lens which draws in the eye again and allows it to focus in on what seems significant. We can do this because we know that the outcome in the two islands was roughly similar, which is where doing the same technique by using Holland as a contrast would not work. Contrast with Holland provides many refreshing comparisons, but it neither provides a sufficiently distancing lens, nor does it help us with finding some of the necessary ingredients, largely because Holland actually failed, until very late, along with many others, to achieve any spectacular transformation into industrial capitalism. Here it was unlike Japan. In other words, in their respective corners, Japan and England are the extraordinary cases. And by a process which, to change the metaphor, we can liken to gold panning, or sieving for gold, or any other process of boiling down or extracting essences, we can see what there is special about these two cases, particularly with a view to absences.